Welcome everyone to another review. Marty Worm here from Heavy Metallurgy, and I'm pretty excited to be talking a bit about one of my personal favorite bands from the early death metal days, a band that has always stood on its own with its own unique sound. That's one nice thing about the past. The old bands, they cultivated their own style and held on to it moving forward, but we're going to be talking about Autopsy's new one. Let's get into it. I am here to discuss the 2023 album, Ashes, Organs, Blood, and Crypts from California's Autopsy. It is the band's 10th full-length album and comes out relatively quickly after 2022's Morbidity Triumphant. Ashes, Organs, Blood, and Crypts is a testament to a very long, independent sounding, hard-working legacy. And Autopsy should be applauded for surviving all the years and holding on to what they are, what they know, and coming around through a time of inactivity. The band took a 16-year break between the album Shit Fun. When they got back together, they came out with Macabre Eternal in 2011, which is since then they've had their head down and moving forward, and it seems like every year or two they're putting out a new record, going on big tours, doing what they need to do. And it's good to know that at the end of the first half of their career, when things were maybe a little frustrating for them, being quiet, maybe the death metal bubble kind of burst a bit for them. They just weren't getting the adulation that the band deserved after being what is very much a trend setter. I mean, these guys really dug in with sick, gross, ugly death metal and put their own stamp on the whole thing and moving forward. And, you know, it's a sound to me that has always been traditional old school death metal mixed with a bit of punk and mixed with a bit of stoner rock. People probably like stoner rock, but yeah, I mean, the jammy type of feel in the riffs and those seedy, gross solos that come in. It just has a jammed out stoner rock vibe to it for me. And it's just a sound that is their own. And they've moved forward over the years, clinging tight to that sound. And, you know, when an Autopsy album comes out, it's always something to be excited about. Whether, you know, are they reinventing the wheel every time? They're probably not, but they are being Autopsy, which is the absolute, the main point. And let's get into Ashes, Organs, Blood, and Crypts. We're going to start off with the opening track, Rabid Funeral. I got to say, this one was a bit of surprise. It's faster and a punky lead-off track with interesting shift in the timing in the middle part of the song. Chris's vocals are the kind of the surprise here. He focuses on a higher screaming style and sound different than his normal meaty, drunken moans that he has kind of perfected over the years. This track feels a bit different than the rest of the album. I love how the bass work of Greg Wilkinson cuts through the mix. I mean, it's having a predominant bass tone in the Autopsy stew is quintessential Autopsy formula. It started early on with Steve DiGiorgio being on Severed Survival and the Fiend for Blood albums. He put a very distinct stamp on what this band needed to include in their arsenal of sound. And it's something that they have kept going over the years. And Greg, this was his first album with the band. He's a monster bass player, and he fits within the Autopsy aesthetic perfectly with very free flowing and colorful, even melodic bass lines that just pierce through the production. Throat Saw is next. Chris locks back into that trademark deep death style by using alternating screams that you heard on the first track, but he uses them more as a dynamic on this one. This song is more in the plodding, straightforward, and awesome Autopsy style with very passionate bass lines, which offer up moments of punk-injected melody. Greg's bass tone is kind of clean and plunky, but with just a bit of dirt to it, so it really cuts through that mix. And his playing style, like I said, has that punky vibe, and when he puts in little melody lines, it feels almost like, crossover, kind of think of DRI's Dealing With It. The way the bass cut through the mix on that is kind of the vibe I get here, just more mean and organic sounding. The next track, No Mortal Left Alive, hints at bludgeoning death doom, but picks up pace a bit more. And there's a manic underlying current here in the feel and structure of the song. Like they're experimenting a bit within their own unique formula. And I gotta say, this manic feeling is something that kind of permeates this record. It kind of sets it apart from Morbidity Triumphant. It's still, the overall presentation is 100% Autopsy. But there is something, the way the guitars are layered and the sound and what they're playing, it's uneasy feeling, which is, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It gives this album a really creepy, sinister vibe. Can't really put my finger on it. Even though it sounds like the riffs might be simplistic, the way they layer other guitar lines on top that might be just a little bit off, the way Danny and Eric combine their forces on here is just, it's sick. It's just very sick, uneasy, manic feeling. And like I said, that's kind of what the feel of this album is all about. Well of Entrails. Man, what a crushing song. Misery-inducing doom intro erupts into an aggressive sort of punkified death metal. The bass leads the charge, and bludgeoning power chords yield to slower doom riffs filled in with gloriously atonal melodies. It's a great track. Again, this is kind of another favorite on the album for me. There's just a manic sickness. Things just seem a bit off on here, and it's the glorious nature of Autopsy. The title track, this one has a feeling of urgency. The verse riffs plow through full steam ahead, and the parts are largely simplistic, yet seem disjointed and unsettling. I found myself eager for a change or for the end of the song. I mean, I didn't dislike the song. It just, the way the track built, it felt like it was going somewhere, but it was denying us from getting there. And the journey was just a little bit wrong, if that makes any sense. So when the slow riff that ends the song kicks in, it felt like a welcome change. The track Bones to the Wolves has a similar vibe to the title track. The main riffs appear simplistic, but again, Eric and Danny's guitar work, just the two uniting on certain things, it just makes the feel of the song extra sickly, if that makes any sense. And again, it's very much the nature of this album. It's just 100% head banging Autopsy. It just this with a even more twisted turn within the songwriting, just under the surface. It gives it a very cool personality for sure. Marrow Field. I love the solo work and dueling twin guitar melodies on this one. Exciting layering, and like the rest of the album, very manic and very much Autopsy. Eric and Danny are quite the demented duo and complement each other extremely well. Butterfly thinks so too. The track Toxic Death Fuck is up next. Punky death track, 100%. Sick with decay and misfortune. Chris channels his inner G.G. Allen on this one, offering up some random coughing to make it well known that this specimen isn't going to survive. He's been in other bands over the years that lean into the punk aesthetic as well. And on this one, like I said, he's got a little bit of a GG appreciation on here. It's just him barking, sounds drunk as hell, although he's probably not, but who knows? Sounds drunk as hell, and it's just a seedy, gross, short, punky track. And after that, the two tracks that come after it, Lobotomizing Gods and Death is the Answer. I mean, these are both good tracks, don't get me wrong here, but if I'm going to put out one disparaging comment on the album, is these two tracks after Toxic Death Fuck, they just feel very similar to what comes before them, but maybe a bit less fleshed out. It feels a bit more chained to a formula than the rest of the album. Again, I really like the tracks. They go, it's kind of the same thing. The faster, uneasy push to the middle, slower part of the song with maybe a solo, maybe some harmonized guitar stuff going on in there. Again, very much Autopsy. It's an Autopsy formula, but at this point in the album, it just kind of seems like those two tracks in particular are put at the last quarter of the album for a reason. They fit within the concept and the context of the record, but maybe they're not as much as standout tracks to have been earlier in the track time. So we wrap up this album with Coagulation, which is a plotting and mean closing track with free-flowing solo work, highlighting, to me, comes off as the stoner rock influence. I mean, like I said, it seems very maybe improvised. The solo work feels improvised, and it's just the way the flow, it has that 70s rock type of vibe to it. I mean, these guys are getting older, pushed up in years, and the 70s rock had a bit of an influence on Autopsy. It had to have. I love the overall feeling in the riffs. Again, they just have a good flow to them, and it ends this album. I mean, it's not an explosive ending by any means, but it's a proper ending. It's a sick, slow ending. I do want to talk about the production for a minute. This album sounds great. It doesn't sound digital. It sounds organic. The guitars have a filth to them. I love, like I mentioned earlier, I love Greg's bass tone, how it leaps off the page. It cuts right through Eric and Danny's swarm of tone. It with that clean but a little distorted on the bottom end distortion. It's just a very organic, roomy sound. The drums cut through, the vocals are the right mix. No complaints about the production. Sounds like Autopsy, but not overly modern. These guys are sticking to their roots with the sound as well, which I'm all for that for sure. Yeah, I mean, this was kind of a quick in and out review. I mean, like I said, Autopsy are certainly not reinventing the wheel here, but on Ashes, Organs, Blood, and Crypts, they do what they do well. They're very much focused, and since they reformed in 2011, they've put out way more albums than they did in their formative years when they were just starting out. So this is a band that has reformed and reclaimed a bit of passion and fire for what they're doing. And I think it's probably also encouraging for them because the fan base finally came around to appreciate what they're doing as well. I think in the beginning there was probably a large Autopsy fan base, but since they weren't Suffocation, since they weren't Incantation, since they weren't all the other death metal styles that took off and actually it got a lot of people excited about, they always kind of seemed like the underground grandfather of the death metal scene. So it definitely, and plus their doomy and punky nature as well also set them apart from their peers as well. So I'm glad these guys got back together and were able to get back out there and see what their music meant to other people and what their music did and meant for death metal as a whole. They're legends. They continue to put out great albums. And honestly, I'm glad they're still around and they're still putting out high quality. So definitely on October 27th, be sure to secure yourself a copy of Ashes, Organs, Blood, and Crypts. Did you like this review? Well, guess what? Myself and my colleagues here on Heavy Metallurgy, we're doing them weekly, and hopefully we're just going to start doing them a bit more as the winter months hit. But right now it's still kind of a busy time for everyone, but one a week for now. And be sure to check out Heavy Metallurgy for more content like this, and of course our weekly streams and our Wednesday album club. Until next time, keep it sick, keep it old, keep it autopsy. Cheers.